Okay, we are going to look at something that Project Drawdown provides, and they do an amazing job of synthesizing things into actionable items, let's say. And in fact, Project Drawdown is a nice book by Paul Hawken, edited by Paul Hawken, and I've converted the entire thing into a series of podcasts on my channel that you can follow up. They keep putting out these reports regularly, and I have talked about my philosophy everywhere that the system right now is all carbon. Everything we eat, we wear, we travel, anything we do is carbon. So system is energy is carbon, everything else is carbon. So the idea is maybe someday we'll have a carbon budget for everybody and they can fit whatever they want into it. But till then, you have to decide how much you want to worry about doing things on your own. There are many things you can do that are kind of no regret decisions, like don't waste food, water, energy, and eat things that are healthy, especially if they are also better for the environment. Like being a vegetarian is better for the environment than eating meat. But if you're culturally someone who eats meat and you get your nutrition and proteins from meat, then you have to be careful, and so on and so forth. Keeping all that in mind, you can look at this list. It says top 20 high impact climate actions for households and individuals. You can click on these and get more details, but I just wanted to include these. And by sector here, together the individual and household actions presented here have the potential to produce roughly 25 to 30% of the total emissions reductions needed to avoid dangerous climate change greater than 1.5 degrees C. There are many details: 1.5 degrees C and 2 degrees C warming by 2100 with a 67% probability is something you hear all the time, and I have written elsewhere and talked about these elsewhere. These are not scientific goals, and we cannot say for sure what will happen in your backyard when we cross 1.5 degrees C or 2 degrees C, and how long do we have to cross it to see dangerous impacts. So its science is not very robust behind such claims, but let's assume that we want to keep global warming to as low as possible, and then worry about how each 0.1 degree centigrade warming produces impacts everywhere, especially at local scale, because you want to be able to predict them and give people the ability to deal with them with early warnings and so on. And you want to also look at what may happen in the next decade and so on. Keeping all that in mind, food 12.4% here if you do the choices, energy 8.6%, travel 2.8%, waste 1.3%. Keep these in mind again and do what you can, but don't feel guilty because not everybody will do it. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. You have to decide for yourself. But the main thing is to make sure that the system is moving towards decarbonizing, and so-called carbon trap that keeps us in this carbon economy needs to be changed, and that's not always up to individuals and households. It is up to inventors, scientists, engineers, corporations, governments, and so on and so forth, right? So let's read then finally what is possible. Reduced food waste. It's now counting the dots. The data presented here represents cumulative gigaton CO2 equivalent over 30-year period, so out to something like 2050, when you ideally want to hit net zero for meeting these global warming targets. Even if they are not scientific, it's okay. If we can do it, it'll be great, right? 2 degrees C is a nice round number, and the small island states want to worry about 2 degrees C being too much for them, because if sea level rises they may go under, so they want 1.5 degrees C. Fine, let's do that. So reduced food waste over 30 years is expected to give 103.1 gigaton CO2 equivalent, which means we have converted non-CO2 greenhouse gases like methane and N2O to CO2 by comparing global warming potential which if you don't know what that is, I have podcasts on that topic that you can look up. Okay, plant-rich diets can reduce 102.2. So these are prioritized based on various criteria. So in terms of just being high impact, so is it easier to reduce food waste than switching to plant-rich diets? Of course it is. So that gets the top rating. It's a no-brainer. Don't waste food. And in fact, there are calculations that show that food waste produces about 6% of the total emissions. We don't want that, right? Distributed solar photovoltaics, 64.9 gigatons over 30-year period. Is this always up to you? Not necessarily, but governments, even India and China, are moving towards more and more solar. So there we are. Insulation of the house. It is something you can do, and it will have a cost though. So that's 18.5 gigatons of CO2 equivalent. LED lighting, another no-brainer. So everybody can do this. Cost is not an issue there. LED lighting, 15.7 gigatons. Public transit, 15.4 gigatons. Can you easily take public transit? Depends on whether you have a choice, whether it is convenient, and can you avoid driving, or maybe you can ride a bicycle. But again, remember, all these things together matter more than one action by us. So if you are taking public transit but you are wasting food or on a heavy meat diet, then it can more than offset your public transit. So you have to put them together. But public transit can save overall 15.4 gigatons CO2 equivalent in a cumulative way. Recycling, solar hot water, 13.7 gigatons over 30. Always remember gigaton CO2 equivalent. I'm not going to keep saying it each time. So solar hot water. Depends on where you are. It's the monsoon. There is no sun for 4 months. What happens? You have to see, and how much it costs, and you need a structure above the roof to do this, and so on and so forth. Recycling, another no-brainer, 11.3 gigatons CO2. But you read a lot about how recycling is not working, and in fact it's not at all working in many places. So we have to be careful assuming that this is working and doing things, or assuming that if we do our part we are done, because somebody may be collecting your trash and just throwing it into a landfill somewhere, and this has happened a lot. Many times things that you think are recyclable are not recyclable because the companies lie. They will tell you it's biodegradable plastic, but that has been coated with something to make it more stronger, or be more water resilient and so on, and that makes it non-biodegradable. So we are trapped as well. High performance glass, something you can do, maybe 11.3 gigatons CO2 equivalent. Carpooling, doable. Public transit versus carpooling may be easier, but you need friends people you can tolerate on long rides, or they're sharing properly and they are on time, and so on and so forth. But carpooling is a great option. Electric cars, again, subsidies may be available, charging stations may not be available, or energy used for charging stations may not be clean, so it's not always in your control. But in general, if we switch to electric cars, assuming energy is also getting cleaner, we will save 9.8 gigatons in 30 years. High efficiency heat pumps doesn't work if in tropical country where you don't have to heat pump works great for places in the mid latitudes where you have heating and cooling, and heat pump is much better than an air conditioner and the heating separately. Heat pump can heat and cool, and it is much more efficient in terms of emissions and so on. Cost wise, you have to figure out again. So always there is a catch. You have to remember. Smart thermostats, another no-brainer actually, which are very good at managing your heating and cooling, and you can figure out what those are. costs may be associated with those as well, or retrofitting may be difficult. Reduced plastic, no-brainer, but remember when COVID came, we all got locked in and we all started ordering things online, and everything is plastic, and everything you order on Amazon or wherever else may be plastic. Everything you buy, even vegetables and fruits are covered in plastic. How much plastic can you avoid really? But system has to change. So again, there is a catch. Hybrid cars, 4.7 gigaton CO2 equivalent for over 30 years. These people feel much better with hybrid cars than EVs because they get range anxiety, and when you go on a long distance drive, you're not sure about charging stations, then you may feel anxious. But now new apps coming to say where the charging stations are. If they are not there, you have to plan, and so on and so forth. So the system has to get better to support you in using EV or hybrid cars. And the words keep getting smaller. Teleconference, telepresence, so you don't have to always go to work. You can work from home and combine, and now there is new data after COVID showing that hybrid working, going to office for a few days and working from home, telepresence, actually is better. It's, companies kept arguing that being in the office face to face makes a huge difference for productivity. Turns out not to be true based on data that hybrid working can help with babysitting expenses. It can help reduce emissions, of course, and also quality of life, standards of living, and so, because if you don't get stuck in traffic for 2 days a week, you may feel much better rather than being stuck for 5 days, right? So that's the idea. Composting, a no-brainer, but if you're in an apartment, you have to decide how to do it safely and whether you will be allowed or not, and what to do after composting in an apartment complex. If you don't have a garden, what do you do with it, right? Electric bicycles, is it safe to ride around? Everything, I'm not putting a negative spin. I'm just saying it's easy to make a list and say this is going to save 25 to 30% of the total emissions, add to the emissions reductions, but are they doable? So I'm pointing them out to you and saying find a way to see how many of these you can do safely and without paying a lot, because ultimately economic costs matter. Electric bicycles, low flow fixtures, so don't waste water. This is definitely a no-brainer. So again, depends on whether you are in a rented place, own place, what it costs, how easy it is to do it. And finally, recycled paper. Okay, just to be negative, a little negative again, a nice Danish study shows that when you have to make a simple choice for a shopping bag, cloth versus paper versus plastic, it is not so easy, because it depends on the kind of questions you ask. Is it just the emissions you always have to worry about? Do you have to worry about washing it, water quality, air quality, other impacts? Life cycle analysis points out that it's not so easy to make this choice all by yourself. The system has to decide and tell you sometimes what is the best option for you. So do these things, do as many as you can, and do more than you can, because don't be lazy, or don't, it's called soft denial, when you don't do things and you ignore things, knowing that it's bad for climate, bad for emissions, you still do it. So that's soft denial. So it's not just people who are denying climate, we are all in it together, so we do have to worry about these things. But it's a good report, it's a good project, it provides good information, so I wanted to give it to you with some caveats. So enjoy saving the planet and saving humanity and saving ourselves and our future posterity, etc. See you in the next podcast.